Hello, what is up YouTube? My name is G3 Iron, and today we are taking a look at league starters and what makes for a good league starter, or rather, what are some of the thought processes that you need to go through when selecting or choosing a build for your league start. This is of course geared towards league starting in the upcoming 3.8 Blight League that starts tomorrow, so we are all very excited and just cannot wait for that new league to drop. Those of you that are new to the channel, welcome. You can like, subscribe, and ding the bell that is directly above my slightly necromantic bald forehead. Those of you that are veterans of the channel, you know how things go around here. We like to drop down in the video description timestamps for your pleasure, as well as citations or references to any other videos or any other websites that we reference. Of course, there are also timestamps placed above my slightly balding necromantic forehead right in the video. So if at any point in time you want to jump ahead or reference something that was previously discussed, you can do so at your convenience. So there are going to be about 7 different tips that we've got as we're looking at league starters today. And the first tip is to set your league goal. This is paramount and really sets the foundation for everything else that you're going to do throughout the league. Setting a league goal could be as simple as saying, hey, I want to get that really sweet 12 challenge MTX or that 24 challenge MTX. Or it could be something like saying, hey, there's a particular play style or character archetype that you'd like to try out. Maybe there's been a buff to an ascendancy that you haven't played. Maybe you've got a currency goal, like you'd like to own a Mirror of Calandra or a certain amount of exalts or valued in chaos. Maybe you've got a particular progress goal, like maybe you've never taken out the Shaper or Uber Elder, or maybe you've never killed Uber Itzari, or maybe you've never made it to a certain progression point in hardcore. Those are different sorts of goals that you might have. Maybe you've never had a headhunter, or maybe you've got another goal entirely like starting your own guild or playing SSF. These are all different sorts of goals that you can set for yourself at the very beginning of the league. And frankly, today being the day before the league drops is when you should have a league goal set, or when you should take the time to gently caress your beard and consider what your league goal is going to be. Based on your goals for the league, you can then adjust your league start character to match those goals. So for instance, if you've got a character whose goal is to make as much currency as possible, you may actually choose a different character to league start than if you've got, let's say, a challenge goal or another sort of progress goal. The goals that you set for yourself are going to help you in selecting a particular build for your league start. Second tip for you today is to brainstorm your starter build. Once you've got some sort of idea of what your goals are, you can begin, and you've probably already subconsciously done this since patch notes came out, and really for the last couple of weeks as we've had teases about Blight League, binging out on different builds that may help you reach your goals. I legitimately look at about 5 to 10 different POBs as every single different ascendancy gets teased. So that way I'm looking at 5 to 10 different builds related to that particular ascendancy and the changes that are going through it. So by the time League drops, I've typically looked at anywhere between 30 to 60 different builds, maybe even 70 different builds, just so that way I've familiarized myself with different options and things that already have been strong and now might be augmented in their strength, or as we always say, buffed in their strength going forward into the next league due to patch notes. Also, this also helps you know if you're looking at patch notes or looking at different builds and gem numbers and gem stats, like what came out today, the gem numbers, you're also able to evaluate whether or not any of the builds that you were brainstorming have gotten nerfed. Obviously, if they've been buffed, that's fantastic. You chose wisely. But knowing the day ahead of time as you're brainstorming your starter build, if there's anything that's going to hamper your gameplay or if there are any nerfs coming, it's good to know that a day before the league drops rather than realizing that a day and a half after the league drops and you've already made a terrible decision with your league starter. So those are all things to do. Another couple of ways to figure out how to choose a build when you're brainstorming is to use Path of Building, to chat with friends. You can ask guildmates, or you can also use the G3 Discord, which of course we've got a link down below, which you can come and join. That's free for everyone to join. And then we've got special perks for Patreon supporters. And we've even got a special channel that's dedicated just for build help and advice, which is really nice. Once you've identified a problem with your particular build, then you need to go and find a solution, right? So brainstorming your build from the get-go helps you identify, hey, what are the potential problems of this build, and how is it that I'm going to adjust it for a league start, right? So brainstorming your build very early on gives you a template, gives you a springboard to actually be able to make a decision whether or not these sorts of builds that you've been brainstorming are going to be viable in the upcoming league. Third thing that you need to do is identify the obstacles to your goal. So once you have your goal set, you can better know how to get from league start to your league goal, from point A to point B. Now, a lot of the times people think it's just as simple as this, right? What's the shortest distance between 2 points? Well, it's a straight line. So you just go league start to end goal and straight line, right? It's just that simple. Well, a lot of the time, your league starter build will not be the same build that's going to carry you to your end goal. Sometimes it will, but most of the time it won't. Because in reality, most of the time, the obstacles that are in between you and your league starter and your end goal are not necessarily going to be accomplished by that build that you've selected as your league starter. So a lot of the times, this is actually what it looks like. It's not really a straight line because there's obstacles in your way, like gearing. Right away from a fresh economy and from a fresh league start, none of us have any gear, right? Like the labyrinth, right? Maybe your build isn't that great at doing the lab, or conversely, maybe your build is fantastic at doing the lab, so lab won't be an obstacle that you really need to worry about. Filling out your atlas is another obstacle potentially in your way. Getting lab trials done, or even finding Uber lab trials, is another potential obstacle. Trading is a massive obstacle. Some players don't like to trade, and so therefore, because they don't like to trade, they're actually going to have a massive obstacle in their way to reaching their end goal if accrual of certain currency types or certain items is their goal, because you can make a ton of currency through trading. If you never want to trade or you're playing SSF, well, it's going to be pretty tough for you to accumulate a bunch of currency, right? Speaking of currency, maybe currency itself is a particular obstacle because you need specific endgame uniques or specific endgame crafted rares in order to finalize your build, which then brings us to crafting recipes, which are also oftentimes difficult to unlock with the unveiling system. So there's all sorts of obstacles that stand in your way between your league starter reaching your end goal. Some of these are going to be more applicable to your particular league starter, and some of them will be less applicable to your league starter. That means that your league starter might have some areas where it excels in, and might have some areas where it's simply overcome in. And that's okay. One of the ways that you can absolutely identify the strengths and know the strengths of your build as a league starter is to identify where it does not excel, and then figure out how to avoid or overcome or work around those particular obstacles that will be unassailable by your league starter build. One concrete example of this, if you are going with a league starter and following someone's build that says this requires these uniques, and they have multiple uniques that are listed, and you look and you see on day one of the league, oh, these leagues from the last league costed several X to purchase. You can then know this is going to be a great build once I get some currency rolling, but you've now identified that currency is going to be an obstacle in your way towards your end game version, your end goal version of your character. Identifying those obstacles lets you know what you can be working on to progress and to further yourself towards your end of the league goal. Fourth tip is to identify the weaknesses of your build. So this isn't just thinking about the different obstacles in the game or different obstacles to you as a player that you don't necessarily enjoy doing, like trading. This is learning exactly what it is, the ins and outs of your particular build. So for instance, what are the weaknesses of your potential league starters? Generally, these are listed in the cons section on a pros cons build guide, but maybe included in there that the build is simply expensive. That's a weakness. Maybe it requires some specific uniques that are not on the common drop table, that are maybe rather rare. Well, that's going to be a weakness. Maybe it only takes off after a certain level or with like the third or fourth ascendancy point unlocked. Maybe that's when you actually can swap from leveling gear to your end game build. Those are weaknesses of potential league starters that you need to be aware of when making a choice about what you're going to league start. Secondly, what style of content does your build struggle with? Is there a particular map boss that you have trouble with? I know for me, it's the Wolven King inside his lair. He generally gives my bosses or my particular builds a pretty hard time. So for a couple of leagues now, I've simply built builds that are going to go in and wreck that particular boss because I haven't wanted to lose characters or lose progress to that particular boss. That's one way how I've approached it. You don't have to approach it that way. You could simply have a guildmate or pay for somebody else to come in and clear a boss that you know is going to be particularly challenging for your build. Highly recommend those of you that'll be playing hardcore like me in Path of Exile 3.8 Blight League that you know ahead of time what particular map bosses you have trouble with before you go and find out with first-hand experience. Otherwise, you'll be ripping and starting another character very soon. Also, particular room layouts or whether or not your build excels in an open environment or an indoor environment. Right? If you're playing something like, let's say, a Spark Inquisitor, and you love having lots and lots of different walls to bounce your sparks off of, that's different than, let's say, an auto-bombing, shield-charging freak that just wants to go along a straight-line linear path along, let's say, I don't know, beach or strand, right? Those are two different build styles that are going to excel in two different layouts. So knowing what style of content your build struggles with is going to indicate for you a particular atlas strategy as well as a particular avenue for you to go and farm repeatedly to go get your goals completed. Also, maybe you're low on chaos resistance or physical reduction. These are just some defensive things to know about. Essentially saying, where is your build going to die? What's going to kill your build, or what is most likely to kill your build? Is it going to be a big wind-up physical one-shot? Is it going to be something having to do with the blight mechanic? Is it going to be something to do with the fact that you're not a chaos inoculated build and you want to run a bunch of, let's say, temple incursions and those chaos spitters? They're everywhere. Make sure you've got chaos resistance in there, right? Maybe you're running particular types of breaches. Maybe you're running a Tull. Maybe you're running a Zoff. You want to make sure maybe you've got 75%, of course, max resistance, but maybe where is it possible for your build to go get a 76 or a 77th percentage of elemental resistances? Know what type of content your build struggles with so you can avoid it, and know what type of content your build is going to focus on so that way you can build towards it. Thirdly, what content or environments does your build excel in? Are you a fast, clear speed build? Is all you want to do is run low tier maps, go, 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 run as many maps as possible in order to make as much currency as possible? Does your build excel in any master environments? Are you potentially going to be a deep delver and you're going to make a bunch of currency off of, let's say, farming fossils? Maybe you're going to run a bunch of temples and double corrupt things for people, or sell the double corruption for profit for yourself. Maybe you're going to go and collect a bunch of beasts, and then you're going to go and fight them on the altar yourself to try and corrupt a headhunter. Maybe you're going to be doing a whole bunch of veiled master missions for Jun because you want to repeat that mastermind encounter that is now very, very uber rewarding. I mean, way, way more rewarding than it has been since it's released. So maybe you're just going to run a bunch of mastermind fights. Know what sort of content and environment your build excels in. And then lastly, are you exceptional at taking on endgame bosses? Maybe you're building a character that's a bossing character. It's not a clear speed character, but it's very good at taking out maybe the Uber Lab, or maybe Uber Azari, or maybe, did I say Uber Azari? Did I combine Aziri and Azaro? Oh no, 4.0 leaks combined. Anyway, maybe you take out Aziri or Uber Shaper. Oh, no, that's more 4.0 stuff. But anyway, maybe you take out some of the endgame bosses, right? Whether that's Shaper, Elder, Aziri, or Azaro. If you're exceptional at boss killing, use that as a service. Sell that to other players who aren't exceptional at that. Know what the weaknesses are of your build. Pay somebody else to take on those weaknesses for you. Chances are there's somebody else happy to do it. Fifthly, prepare for success with path of building. You should always have a skill tree planned out for your starter. Seriously, dear G3 community. If you message on Friday that you don't have a tree set up, and it's like Friday afternoon or September 6th, and the league has just dropped, and you just message and you say, I don't have a POB, what should I play? The only person who is at fault here is you. I just got to be blunt there. This is your fault you don't have a POB yet. If you are watching this video right now, you ought to have a POB planned. If the answer to that question is, oh, Iron, I don't have a POB planned, oh my goodness, that's okay. Get one now. As soon as this video wraps up, make sure that your POB, whether you're following somebody else's or making one for yourself, get that done so that way you know exactly what it is that you're going to be allocating for passive point-wise, as well as all of the different aspects for your itemization and for your ascendancy upgrades. You should know exactly what quests are required for your needed gems and jewels. If you're using any of the skills that require threshold jewels, you need to know exactly where you can acquire those. If you've got specific things that you need to hit on the 10-act story campaign, then you hit them. Those are called mandatory quests. Maybe you come back and you hit the optional ones afterwards. I do this almost every single hardcore league. I will go and level several times past a zone before going back and getting passive points inside that zone. So Dweller of the Deep, I usually do that after I've ascended like the first time. Like I'm like mid-level 30 at that point, and I go back and I get Dweller of the Deep. You know why? Because I don't want to lose a level 5 character to Dweller of the Deep. It's just not worth it. It's too slow, whereas loading time is going to be literally the longest thing that's going to happen when you're at much, much higher level above those optional skill point zones. So know exactly what sort of quests you need and know exactly where you get those gems. Maybe you're playing, I don't know, let's say a Witch, or let's say a Templar, or let's say a Shadow. But the skill gems that you need to start off with in Act 1 or Act 2 or Act 3 are only available to another Ascendancy or to another character class, and they're not available to you until Siosa in Act 3. Where is it that you're going to get those gems or those jewels from? Make sure that you've got other guildmates that are going to be running in various character classes of themselves, that they can pick those up for you as needed. You should also know what your desired setup is on a 2-link, a 3-link, a 4-link, and a 5-link. Yes, every single build guide on the planet pretty much has got a 6-link setup, but can you answer the question, hey, which of these 6 links comes in last? Like, which of these 6 links is the worst 6 link, and so therefore the last one that's going to come in? Which of these are the top 5 priorities? Which of these are the top 4 priorities for when you get a 4-link? Which of these are the top 3 priorities for when you get a 3-link, etc., etc.? So you need to know what your desired setup is at any given point in time, and having a POB helps with that. I actually keep notes of when it is that I want to swap to different particular gem setups inside the notes section on POB, because that's what the notes section is literally there for. It's there for you to put in whatever kind of notes that you want to put in for your particular build. Lastly, you want to have an upgrade priority list. So is your weapon, your helm, your chest, or your jewelry the most important thing to get first for your final end game setup? Like, where is it that you most need to prioritize your upgrades? That's going to tell you how you need to be crafting. That's going to gear you and focus you for how it is that you're going to be trading, or how it is that you're going to be looking in your loot filter for particular upgrades. Where are uniques being used in your build, and how will you fill out resistances, life, or energy shield? How is it that you're defensively going to be set up? Is there a particular chess piece that is the top tier end game GG version of everything? Well, you probably won't have that on opening weekend. So what are you going to settle for? What are you going to upgrade to along the way? Yes, there are going to be times where you can simply find a rare or a magic item and craft on it yourself and make that usable as you're progressing. But it's also nice to have set aside for yourself some goals and some things that you can constantly be on the lookout for upgrading your priority list. Lastly, what jewels are you looking for? Whether they be abyss jewels or regular passive tree socketed base jewels. Know what stats that you're looking for on those jewels and start looking for them on the trade site from day one. A lot of the time people will list jewels on day one of a particular league, and they'll list them relatively cheaply. You could get something that could be worth several chaos, maybe several dozen chaos, maybe several exalted on day one for incredibly cheap, maybe even just a chaos. So you could get your endgame jewels relatively fast early on by preparing for success with Path of Building. Sixth, make sure that you're aware of these mistakes that will set you behind with your league starter. So first off, failing to account for your league goal will set you behind. If you want to complete the Atlas for the first time, let's say that's your goal, then making a build that won't survive past tier 6 is a serious flaw. So make sure that whenever it is that you are building in your league starter, you are accounting for your league goal in that. To say, this is how my league starter is going to incrementally build me towards my league goal, rather than saying, oh yeah, this is my league starter and this is going to be my league finisher. That's totally the way how it's going to work. It never works that way, even for the top end players. A lot of the time they'll still have a starter build, and then they'll transition that build into something else that they'll use later on. Secondly, failing to brainstorm multiple builds is a mistake that will set you behind. If you go for the first thing that you see that's shiny, like let's say you look at the first build, I've seen so many people on our Discord say, oh my goodness, I'm going to go with a Poison Assassin. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with going with Poison Assassin. Those of you that are like, oh, Iron, why are you talking bad about my Poison Assassin? I'm not talking bad about your Poison Assassin. I'm saying if that's the first and only thing that you've looked at, you don't have a reference point or a comparison point for what is good, strong, or going to be reliable in the upcoming 3.8 Blight League. So make sure that if you see something that's shiny and looks good, compare it to something else. This is one of the reasons why I'll look at 5 to 10 different POBs of the same ascendancy to make sure I'm absolutely understanding different vantage points, because having a discussion essentially with other people and their path of building trees and their build guides allows me to reap the benefit of understanding different perspectives, both weaknesses and strengths of different builds. Also, failing to brainstorm multiple builds means that a new skill gem that comes out, they're pretty notorious for being either way too strong or way too weak. So by playing a build that relies heavily on new gems, that's basically do at your own risk, right? That's on your own head, be it, right? If you choose to do that. So there are going to be some new skill gems. Expect for some of them to be incredibly strong and broken and meta defining, and expect for some of them to be terrible and to be things that people are very, very disappointed with on League launch and on release. So by failing to brainstorm multiple builds, if you just go with the one thing that relies on that gem that turns out to suck, you don't have any other options, and now you're wasting time during the League starting to brainstorm what you should build next, instead of actually just saying, okay, this didn't work, I have a plan B, and this is how I'm going to transition. Third mistake that will set you behind is failing to acclimate yourself with your obstacles or your weaknesses. This is particularly true for us that are going to play hardcore in 3.8 Blight League. Dying in hardcore to content that you never should have attempted is, most of the time, like 99% of the time, it's your own fault. If you can't run reflect maps, make sure you read every map you seek to attempt. I'm just saying, if you're playing a Righteous Fire build and you depend on, let's say, regen, and you run a map that says no regen, that's on you. That's not the build. That's not the build guide maker. It's not the content creator that recommended the build guide to you. That's on you. So make sure you're acclimating yourself with your obstacles and the weaknesses of your build. Seventh tip is, of course, our FAQ. So I've got a bunch of these different variation forms of these questions over the last week or so. First off, oh, Iron, I still can't decide on a build after watching this video. What should I do? Well, there's a couple of things you can do. I sometimes will ask my kids, I'll pull up pictures of different characters and ask them, hey, guys, what do you think? What should I play here this league? I actually have a character that is named and still alive in Hardcore Standard that's literally called Ezra Picked This Guy because my son picked him. So I didn't pick him for that particular hardcore league. My boy picked him. So I would find something creative for yourself. I would find a creative way to do it. Ask a friend, ask a significant other. You can even drop one down in the comments and say, hey, I still can't decide on a build. People in the G3 community, tell me what it is that I should play. There's a lot of different ways to actually go about deciding on a build. For me, it's asking my kids. That's personally what I do. But I would recommend actually asking in the comment section as well, because there's lots of different people right here in the community that will give you great ideas. Secondly, should I go with a newer build concept or an old reliable build? This is a tough philosophical one. One that I will say you need to pay attention to patch notes. If the patch notes have not messed with, nerfed, or adjusted, or changed your old reliable build, then going with that as a league starter is an excellent, excellent idea, because you know the base, you know the floor, you know the threshold, and you've got some familiarity with the build potentially. If you go with a newer build concept, well, there are some things that are untested. Maybe you don't know what sort of content particularly it's going to be weak to, or what sort of content it's particularly going to be strong for. That being said, maybe it's a newer build of concept that you get in on the floor level early, and therefore things aren't as expensive as what they will be later on in the league, and you can actually make a bunch of currency selling off things that you find for that character as you continue to progress that character onto higher and better gear. So there's a trade-off in going with either of those. The advantages, of course, to a newer build concept are much, much higher risk and much, much higher reward. An old reliable build is much more stable, much more solid, and that's generally what I choose to go with for a league start, especially when I am league starting in hardcore. Thirdly, hey Iron, I've got this really great idea for a build, Iron. Hey Iron, will you play it? Please, please, please. The answer is no. I will not play it as my league starter. At some point, I might play it. What I would recommend to you, if you've got a great build that you want to show off or that you'd like me to show off or play, I'd highly recommend for you to put together a build guide and then go ahead and share it on our G3 Discord in the build guides and build help and advice section on that text channel. I would highly recommend for you to share it there, because lots of people are going to see it there, and I'll see it there and be able to evaluate it and maybe even get turned onto it myself and play that particular build. That's the best way to go about suggesting a build. Fourth FAQ, what are the best ways to fill out uniques maps in a new league as you league start? The absolute best way, and I realize this is going to turn some of you off because some of you play alone and solo, truly alone and solo. The best way to do this is to do it in a rotation or in a group with friends or guildies. That's the best way, because then you can all say, hey, I've got maps number 1, 7, 8, and 12, and somebody else goes, hey, I've got 2, 6, 5, and 9. Okay, great. That's like half of your first 12 unique maps that between the two of you have. But if you just run them solo, neither of you are going to have your overlapping ones. And then once you start to pull in more and more guildies, it becomes multiplicative, right? It's fantastic. All of a sudden you go from, hey, I only had 3 unique maps to now I've got like 15 of them all filled out because we as a guild all ran them. So that is the best way to fill out unique maps. If you're rolling solo, Zana actually got a buff this particular league. We covered it yesterday in the patch notes, where she is potentially going to offer 5 different unique maps when you bump into her for a Zana map mission, which is hopefully going to greatly expedite the unlocking and filling out of unique maps in a new league. Fifthly, my build got nerfed via the patch notes. Oh no, what do I do? Well, you're going to want to remember that if you've brainstormed properly, if your build that was option A got nerfed via the patch notes, then jump on to maybe your plan B or plan C, right? If plan C and B both got nerfed, jump on to plan D. This is oftentimes why I will release videos that have like 5 to 6 to maybe even 7 different build guides attached to them, because those are all builds that I'm thinking about playing depending on how they interact with the league content and depending on how the patch notes actually impact those particular builds. So that being said, I play POE all the time and I'm always thinking about it. You might not be. So what I would highly recommend is check out some of those videos, not just from our channel, but check out some videos with some suggested builds. That should give you again, a springboard or a launching pad to actually think about different builds that you could have. And do that today. Don't do that necessarily tomorrow or the next day, because once the league drops, you're not going to want to be wasting time brainstorming. You're going to want to be slaying monsters. 6 FAQ. I feel like I'm burning out on POE. What should I do? If you are genuinely burning out on POE, we've actually got a video in the channel that will probably speak to some of the issues of your burnout. But that being said, I can just tell you right now, it's okay to take a break. Like, seriously, it's okay just to take a deep breath right now. Say, it's okay to say, I'm burning out on POE and I want to take a break. Take a break for a few weeks. Take a break for a few days. What I actually do when I feel like I'm burning out on something is I will actively tell myself, okay, you don't get to play this thing until such and such. And then as I build up to that time, it kind of becomes like the forbidden fruit thing, where I'm like, oh man, I'm only 2 days away. I'm only 3 days away. I'm only 4 days away from that game that I'm burning out on. I really kind of want to go play it. And so then it actually builds up an anticipation and excitement to actually getting back into that thing, rather than like a feeling of dread or anxiety when you're burnt out. Like, ugh, this is just bleh, I don't want to do that thing. So I would recommend taking a step back, setting a goal date, and then building up your anticipation and your excitement for actually playing that again in the future. Thanks so much for watching. I would love to hear your own comments, thoughts, and feedback based on our video discussion today. What are your tips and tricks that you'd like to share with the community regarding league starters? Secondly, when have you had a successful league starter or a whopping failure of a league starter? I can share with you a real quick story on this. For me, the whopping failure of a league starter was when Impale first came out. When Impale first came out, I gave it a shot. I wanted to try all of the new shattering steel effects. I wanted to try all of those new various Impale mechanics. I didn't have a champion ready at that point in time in standard to just mess around with. So I thought, hey, I'll level with a champion. I'll grow this into, you know, this physical stacking monster that will just blow everything up, just dealing physical damage. It was awful. It was absolutely atrocious. Okay, by day 3, I think I was like level 75 on that character. By day 3. And this was not for lack of playing. I think I had like 20 hours played at that point. I'm not saying this about anybody else in their playtime and their speed. I, at 20 hours into a league, should not only be at level 75, unless I'm playing hardcore and have died several times. Like, that would be the only reason why I should be there. So, that was my whopping failure. I swapped over to a couple of different builds as soon as I could, but that was a massive, massive failure for me. I was very, very glad that I had option B and C lined up for me to play, because option A turned out to be an absolute stinkfest that was terrible to gear for, and that was terrible to craft for. So it was good that I had a B and C planned. That being said, boy, starting out when Impale got released and trying it out on release, that was, for me, a whopping failure. A wildly successful league starter, another version of the same story, was actually during Synthesis League. I tried to have an Inquisitor, a Spark Inquisitor, and I played in hardcore. And that guy made it all the way up, I think, to like level 83 or 84 before he died. And he didn't die due to gear. He didn't die due to anything that was a failure on his part as a character. He died because I was being dumb and I was not paying attention, as I should be, to the amount of AoE and radius on a particular map boss. It was the lighthouse map boss with his big charged explosion, and I was just standing next to him casting Spark. And I took the full brunt of his explosion. So mental note, don't do that on the lighthouse map. Don't stand close to him if you're playing hardcore. But other than that, that guy was a fantastic character, and he was wildly successful. Like, for all of the gear that I found on that guy, for as cheap as he was to gear for a Spark Inquisitor in Synthesis League, he was a very, very strong character. Hopefully I'll have a very, very strong League starter this league, but let us know down in the comments below what your tips and tricks are and what successes and what whopping failures you have had as you have League start. Thanks so much once again for watching. Shout out to all of our Patreon supporters, and I hope that 3.8 Blight League is the league where a Mirror of Calandra drops for you.